Citing his advanced age, Pope Benedict announced today that he will step down later this month. I'm David Gillen for the New York Times. We'll be speaking later with a Notre Dame professor about the impact here in the United States. But first, Rome Bureau Chief Rachel Donadio is on the line. So Rachel, the Roman Catholic world has reacted with shock and sadness to the resignation of Benedict. The news seemed to catch even his most inside advisors in the Vatican by surprise. He has seemed frail in recent months, but really it's still a shock. What's the mood inside the Vatican this morning?
Well, at the press conference, the Vatican spokesman, Father Lombardi, said that it wasn't entirely unexpected in that Benedict had said in the past that he would consider resigning if he felt he was unfirm and not able to do his duties. But no one really expected it right now. I mean, it's one thing to say in theory this could happen. It's another to just kind of show up on a rainy Monday morning and discover that the Pope has resigned, the first Pope to do this in about 6 centuries.
Right. I mean, as I said, there seemed to be some concerns about his health. He had been receiving some help walking and so forth. If I could just read briefly from the statement that he issued today. Strength of mind and body are necessary, strength which in the last few months has deteriorated in me to the extent that I've had to recognize my incapacity to adequately fulfill the ministry entrusted to me. Still, I mean, again, as you say, even people very much inside were taken by surprise. I had read a report that his advisors were literally shocked into stunned silence when he announced this.
That could very well be. I mean, the thing is that this Pope is full of surprises. He just when you think it's nothing is happening at the Vatican, there's this, huge unexpected thing. This is a papacy that has been marked by all kinds of difficulties, scandals, most recently a kind of what they call the Vatileaks scandal, these leaked documents that came out, that really weighed on the Pope. So did, he's a theologian, he's a shy guy, and he doesn't seem to thrive on the public demands of his ministry. I noticed that at midnight Mass, during Christmas, he was dozing off. He's tired, but it's one thing to be tired. It's another to say, you know what, I'm going to retire.
Right.
What happens now is there's a big scramble for power. Who is going to become the next Pope?
Right. Let's. You mentioned his legacy. Let's head back to that for a moment. Before Benedict became the Pope, he was Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, and he was sometimes called God's Rottweiler for his conservative views, his strict adherence to church doctrine. His papacy has been more cerebral than that of his predecessor, John Paul. But he's also served at a time in which the church has been somewhat in decline in his native Europe, and also obviously been marked by a series of scandals and controversies, including hundreds of new allegations of sexual abuse by priests. What is his legacy going to be?
I think his legacy is going to be, as you put it, as a theologian Pope, as someone who was extremely focused on the role of the church in a world where secularism was taking over, where the church has in some ways a smaller role in the world than it had in the past. I'm afraid that the sexual abuse scandal will also be part of his legacy, what he did, whether he did enough when he was in his previous job as the head of the Vatican's doctrinal office. He's seen by his defenders as someone who kind of wanted to come in and clean up and clean house and took these scandals very seriously. Now, victims abuse groups say that he didn't really do enough at all. He was had difficulties managing the Vatican. The Vatican, like any big institution, is a huge bureaucracy. It's a hierarchy. The buck stops with him, but the question is whether he could adequately govern it. I'm afraid another part of his legacy is going to be difficulties in governance. He basically went on a lot of foreign trips, but following in the footsteps of John Paul II, his beloved predecessor. He kind of is someone who was very much in the shadow of John Paul, but who was brought in to carry on the mission of John Paul, and in some ways he was seen as a placeholder. The question is between John Paul and what? Although he does have, there are accomplishments that he's made in his own right, although I do feel like so much of this papacy was dogged by scandal.
Right. Let's talk about that. And now what? His successor. Obviously, the Vatican has said that they're going to convene the cardinals quickly to select a new pope. We might have a new pontiff by Holy Week, end of March. Speculation is already rife about who this might be. Is a short list developing at all? We were speaking before the cameras began rolling that there's some discussion about whether we might see a pope from what are known as the missionary territories, from Africa, from Latin America, or from Asia. What about that?
I think it really depends on what the cardinals who will elect the next pope think. It's easy for people especially in the United States, to say what we need is the first African pope or the first Latin American pope. The question is what will the cardinals, a lot of them Italian, think is best? I mean, the challenge of the Vatican is that it's the universal church, it's a global organization, but sometimes it's run like an Italian village.
Right.
Now, a lot of the names on the short list, they're pure speculation. No one has any idea. One name that's mentioned in terms of Italians is Cardinal Scola, who is the Archbishop of Milan. Mm-hmm. In terms of Latin America, some people mention Cardinal Sandri, who is an Argentine but has spent most of his life in Italy at the Vatican. But the one person that a lot of people are talking about is Cardinal Marc Ouellet, who is from Canada. He was the Archbishop in Quebec. And he has an interesting background because he was a missionary in Colombia in Latin America, so he understands that reality very well. He's now head of the Vatican's Congregation for Bishops, so he understands how to manage a Vatican dicastery, which is, basically a Vatican office. And he has dealt with the sex abuse scandal in Canada with mixed results depending on who you talk to, but it's an issue that he's taken seriously and has addressed. So people seem to think that he might be a good candidate because he meets a bunch of different criteria like that.
Rachel, thanks so much. We'll be following it.
My pleasure.
John McGreevy is a professor of American religious history at Notre Dame University. He joins me now to talk about the potential impact of this announcement here in the United States. Hello, Professor.
Hi.
So, as we were just discussing, so much of the news in recent years about the Catholic Church seems to have been dominated by the headlines of scandal, and one gets the sense that here in the United States, many Catholics are looking for leadership that will help steer the Church through this difficult period. Let me ask you, what is the state of Catholicism in America today?
Well, I think it's a complicated story. On the one hand, there's health, there's vibrant institutions, successful parishes, universities, hospitals. On the other hand, there's significant decline. Anyone who looks at the number of Catholics who attend Mass, their adherence to church teachings, their loyalty to and identification with the Church has seen very significant decline, especially over the last 20 years.
Right. How about the relationship between the Vatican and the American clergy at this point? Do they see eye to eye?
Well, it's less that they see eye to eye than I think to remember that the most important development in Catholicism generally over the last 30 years has been this is a more global church.
Right.
There are more ties between Rome and the church around the world. And so that means in some sense there are closer ties between Rome and the United States than there were even a generation ago. That said, there's obviously sharp disagreement between some of the clergy, especially the older clergy, and Vatican positions on controversial issues like contraception or abortion or gay rights.
Right. I wanted to talk for a minute about the more than 50,000 or so Roman Catholic nuns in this country. Rome has at times tried to recast their leadership of some orders in a more conservative mold, and the sisters have at times received this outpouring of support, particularly from the laity. What is the state of that?
Well, listen, I think most ordinary Catholics respect and value the work that generation after generation of women religious did for the Church in this country. The women religious built the hospitals, built the schools, taught the young people, and people value that and revere many of those women. That said, it's clear that some officials in Rome, it's not actually clear how many, wanted to kind of rein in or change the definitely more liberal views of most women religious. My own view is that won't last that long. We already see the investigation, the so-called investigation that the Vatican was launching, beginning to peter out. And it seems to me that this was an initiative that won't have very long legs.
Right. Rachel and I were obviously just talking about the possible successor, and it is pure speculation really at this point. But what do you think the first order of business should be for the new Pope in regards to the United States?
I'm happy to speculate as well, but I think the key thing for the new Pope, and this is not just the United States, but just the global Church, is to assert greater control over the Vatican bureaucracy. I mean, one of the I think Benedict XVI's legacy is going to be, in the long term, his beautiful essays, his writing, his extraordinary talks. In the short term, it's been a very chaotic period within the Vatican, and as the joke is, lots of little popes running around ordering people what to do. And I think the first thing that the new pope will have to do is assert a greater control and a more consistent message coming out of the Vatican.
Got it. Professor, thanks so much for speaking with us this morning. That's all for now. Please stay with us at nytimes.com for more. I'm David Gillen for the New York Times.